problems, but then again, you never know. Okay, yes. So, morning, Dave. Morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Niagara.
Welcome, everybody. Well, I'm going to do Paul Lemire a bit of a service. Paul and I, once a month, we usually take a look at the agenda for City Council. Well, we'll be doing it on Monday instead of Tuesday. I think it's a really good idea. It's better for him because he has to upload a video and stuff, so that takes time. So that wouldn't be ready for the council meeting on Tuesday if we did it on Tuesday. So do it on Monday is better. I think it's a better idea all together because it gives everybody about a day or so to get to the video and get a bit of an explainer on the agenda. So anyway, that's my public service for Paul.
Yeah.
And last night I was at the meeting of Lori Lococo's meeting. It was 2.5 hours on uncomfortable chairs.
Yeah.
And my number one takeaway, morning, Metaphysical Mike.
Well,
anyway,
those chairs are always uncomfortable. But they're always, the halls that you're probably going to spend more time in, like Lions, always seem to have the most uncomfortable chairs. But they don't have the budget for for sparkly new ones, right?
Well, we bought a bunch for Heartland Forest. We bought a bunch of them for Heartland Forest one year when they came to us to get and asked, and they're really nice. They're pretty nice, and I think we got one similar to that in our meeting room at one of our nonprofits, and they're nice. But the ones they replaced, I'm telling you, I thought they were going to fall apart. And talk about uncomfortable. But last night was uncomfortable chairs, and I have to hand it to Lori. But as I said before, and I think I was pretty much correct, that her explaining abilities are very good. When asked a question, she explains it thoroughly. Over and over again. She explains everything very thoroughly. She makes sure that everybody knows what is happening. There were talks about Airbnbs, and there talks about whether roads were fixed or not, and and she explained a lot of different things. I mean, it was I don't know how she does it, and it was kind of like, you know how people are, they just go chat on and they don't get to the point, and they belabor a point. And once the question was asked, they try to go on to another person, but that same person keeps interjecting. And while she's trying to move on to the next person, somebody else is interjecting. But she was able to keep it all together. And so that's pretty good. I asked one question near the end there, and I asked whether or not the firefighter compensation would be sustainable in the future. She didn't answer it directly, so she sounded more like a politician that time, because she says, well, this is a problem all over Ontario. Yeah, I know that, but she did make it very clear for everyone else to understand that fire departments are being a strain on every community in Ontario. And John Ringle-Bain was there, and he was able to add something to that, talking about how somebody in Toronto, if they get $200,000, they have to have that here in Niagara, and that kind of thing. But my overall take there was she was able to, and I mean, people complained about, puddles and water and all kinds of different things, and bike paths, and she was able to try to get it.
I'm interested in the audience. So how much of the mix of people that were there were Chippewa residents versus people like you and I that would be there regular versus, people that would come to any event that Laurie Lococo is going to have.
Well, it was some of the usual faces like John Ringo
Yeah.
Beam. You might see him there at times. There was Deb Jackson was there.
Well, he's also a local resident.
Yeah, she doesn't live down there. The other ones that it seemed to me that were sound as if they're mostly from in and around Chippewa. But like I say, you're the usual faces you might see at one of those things. Like I said, I saw Deb Jackson there, and she's usually pretty good at keeping up on city affairs.
Yeah, she's a downtown resident. Yes, absolutely. I wish that Deb would come back onto this show because she always makes a good contributions.
Well,
yeah,
I don't know. She can't handle the fame, I guess.
All right. Anything else to go?
Some people just can't handle celebrity.
Anything else to discuss?
Not really. But it was a pretty good information thing, and I have to admire Lori to be able to go through that when you've got people that are a little irate. They're not explaining themselves well. They wander around. Like I can't. When I was listening there, I was just kept thinking to myself, "Get to the point." Not Lori, but whoever's asking the question.
Yeah,
get to the point. Get to the point. And
yeah.
Will you get to the point? And then they would add more comments later.
Yeah, give your information and then ask your question.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So one we didn't get to yesterday was a homeless landlord fights criminal charges, disputes between tenants and landlords, and this is all getting out of hand. This relates to a case in Hamilton, particularly. A woman was forced, a landlord is being forced to live out of well, they're talking here about a woman forced to live out of her car. In another case, a realtor, a tenant, and their friend got into a dispute that resulted in criminal charges. And in both these situations, the tenants refused to leave properties that were sold or properties that were up for sale in Hamilton. Now, the people who are making these, the people who are in this report, who are giving the comments in this report, are largely realtors. One of the biggest problems I have to say in relation to realtors is actually when it comes down to dealing with tenants and tenant issues, they don't know how to do it properly and they often do it wrong.
Yeah, this whole thing, I have to go back, find it now. Is this the one, the homeless owner?
Yeah. Okay. And she's not the only homeless owner. This has become so common that I saw one question, one in the LTB the other day, and I was just sitting there with I had some students in there, and he was telling his story about how he was homeless. And honestly, it was so unbelievable. We were just laughing it out of court, right? We were sitting there, everything he was saying, you saw the expression on his face, and it's like, I don't believe you. I do not believe you for a second.
That he was homeless?
That he was homeless. Not a bit.
Why?
Well, he's talking about his family, and he's separated from his family, and it's like, it's like, no, you're not. It just didn't seem. The story was just inconsistent. If you look in a courtroom and you see people lying, and you kind of think, and you think to yourself, well, that guy's going to go down,
Yeah. So what was a guy in court lying about his homeless status there for?
Well, here's a guy who
what was he trying to do?
Yeah, he's a guy who owns 6 or 7 different properties, and he's saying that I'm homeless. I'm living out of my car. Right? He actually has an office in one of those properties, but he's got half a dozen homes, and including one that is kind of a basement apartment that's completely empty, right? And so and the paralegal for the tenant
Why was he
uncovering
why was he claiming to be homeless? Was this a dupe, trying to get somebody out of the apartment? Is that it?
Yeah, he's trying to get somebody. Yeah, he's trying to get somebody out of an apartment on the excuse that he's moving in, and that he's divorced and everything like that. And it just didn't make sense, especially since the tenant was saying, "Hey, his wife was round there all lovey-dovey the other day."
So what's this guy's action like? He wants this guy out. You want get somebody out of their apartment. Does he think he can get more money for it? Is that the real reason?
Well, that essentially, yeah, because the tenant who's been there has been there since about 2016, before the prices went up.
Okay.
And that's what's the rub about all of this one. And then there was another landlord who was doing exactly the same, who had succeeded in evicting a tenant, but yet, and again the same thing, given an N12. And then the worst about this particular one is he said it's for his parents to come back to Canada. The guy who moved in, I don't know too much about the guy who moved in, but hey, he was, the landlord was claiming he'd been building the place. He gave him the keys to actually repair the place. And 6 months later, the guy's still there. It's like, are you crazy? And there's another one where the landlord's, claiming to be at Destitute's door,
Yeah.
Sometimes I believe, sometimes I get it. I do understand there are issues, but sometimes, honestly, these people are just too unbelievable. I'm not saying this individual in Hamilton isn't genuine, right?
No, well, we hear the story, and of course, soon as the story happens, then of course you're going to get all kinds of fakers if they think they can take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, probably for every one real homeless person, there's probably another person trying to use that. So you're going to have to prove that you're homeless if you want to get back into your own place. But the main part of this whole article is the huge amount of delay and sort of ponderously slow court action to get people out or get people in or protect them or not protect them.
You see, what Conrad Zerini, who's the owner and broker of record for a Remax Escarpment Reality, and he basically says of the roughly 10,000 transactions his firm worked this year, he says 4 or 5% have fallen through because of tenants who refuse to leave, drawing out closings for months on end.
Yeah, that's and okay, that's obviously a problem. If you have a house and you have a tenant, let's say you have an upstairs tenant and they refuse to leave, how can you sell the house?
Yeah.
And if you do sell it, how do you get to the new owner? How do they get them out of it? Now, obviously, that like in a perfect world, obviously, you just phone up somebody and say, okay, this person doesn't want to move. Somebody comes along and looks at the rights and not the rights and see, okay, you have to evict in 6 months or 2 months or whatever the conditions are.
There's two ways that we would advise a landlord who's trying to sell that property that has a sitting tenant in it. Right.
Yeah.
First of all, you can attempt to take it over for own use, right? Which and the rules are very, very strict on that. So you'd have to move in, you'd have to show genuine intent to move in, and you would probably not have to, so you'd have to swear an affidavit, and you would have to make sure you don't sell the house or don't re-rent the house within a 12-month period. All right, you're free to do what you want after the 12-month period. The other question is that you tell the buyer, and you have to be honest up front, and this is where many of the real estate brokers are not being honest. Let me be very clear about this. I've seen it where they are not honest. They're not telling people there's a sitting tenant in here. Right. So because they're not telling people there's a sitting tenant, what needs to happen is the buyer buys the property with a sitting tenant and then has to do the N12 because they are moving into the property. That is the better way. I would tell the landlord who has a sitting tenant not to actually do an N12, to have the buyer do the N12.
Yeah, so that's a good point. But what about this backlog? I know that it was always a slow process even before COVID, but it seems to be like a painfully slow process at any time.
Well, actually, they are moving forward. They're moving quicker, believe it or not, with N12s right now, with the owner's own use, and with the N13s, they're moving forward with those. And the question here with that has been, what you need to do is actually have a good story to tell the board about why you want this hearing rushed. But typically, I'd say that they're coming. These type of applications to the board are getting heard in. Well, we've had the earliest in basically 6 weeks.
Okay, so I don't know. You see some optimism, but the article is talking about long, ponderous lines.
They are long lines for a lot of stuff. That's for sure.
Do you see any? Are they going to throw any more resources at it to pick up the pace?
Well, the worry I have at the moment, I have to say, with the LTB is poor training of adjudicators. At one time, adjudicators had to have 6 months of training. Now they have basically 60 hours of training right now.
Oh, great.
And then about 6 weeks of sitting on other people's cases.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too encouraging.
No, not very encouraging at all.
Well, I'm glad I'm not into that mess. Anyway.
Yeah, and that pause on. It's certainly true that pause on LTB hearings at the beginning of COVID never helped still not helping anybody. But I would say we haven't got any. We haven't got any real cases that are backlogged. Well, other than the tenant cases where the tenants have moved out, generally speaking, we haven't got any tenant cases that are 2 years old now anymore. Okay. Most of them have been heard within 18 months.
Okay, well, still 18 months, a long time.
Yeah. I know it's a long time. Yes, it is. It is a long time.
It's a year and a half. You're trying to get a tenant out. You got to wait a year and a half.
No, I said these are tenant cases. So these are cases the tenants taken against the landlord for, alleged landlord wrongdoing. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Very often with these cases, the tenant has long since moved out. Right. But they're doing a better job of emergency hearings because, for example, there was a tenant who had an emergency hearing because of the fact that the case involved a child. Because the landlord wanted to evict a child. So therefore, that was heard more urgently.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Where else are we going now?
Yeah, okay. We can move. Okay, so then let's get back to there. All right. Doug Ford's announced that he's going to be building a tunnel under the 401 to carry more traffic. Now, I have actually been in some tunnels. They have a highway that tunnels under a section of Brussels for about 10 to 15 kilometers that I've been through. Phenomenal little highway. But I was going through when I'm going through there at 100 kilometers an hour, so I'm fine with such a highway. If I'd have been going through there at 0 kilometers an hour, I'd be in a desperate situation, I think.
Yeah, well, the one thing about tunnels, I went through one in Portugal. It's like 5 through a mountain. It was kind of like 5.5 kilometers long. It was really long.
Yeah.
It was probably the longest tunnel I've ever been in.
Yeah,
and at least in a car. But seriously, Doug, you're tunneling under the 401. I don't know. Doug is I don't know.
Well,
next thing you know, he's going to talk about space aliens. He's going to start wearing why like that is how feasible is that? And when I read that, how feasible is that? That's a great long distance, and a tunnel of that kind and a tunnel of that length is going to cost insane amounts of money.
Yeah. One of the things I heard one time when I was living in London, although they never created it as far as I'm aware, they were talking about having an extra lanes above the M25, the circular road around London. So they were talking about having every few junctions you could go up onto the elevated section, and the idea of the elevated section is that if you were going long distance, get on the elevated section as soon as you can. If you were going, like say if you were going 100 kilometers around the M25, get on the elevated section because you'd miss all the local traffic jams, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I can see an elevated section working. I'm not so sure, I'm not so sure about a tunnel under the 401.
Well, of course, there's all kinds of resistance for road builds. There's environmental resistance. People don't want any more highways in their backyard. Everybody wants to use them, but everybody doesn't want to have them built near them.
Yeah.
You're going to need them, unfortunately, because our province is getting bigger all the time. This is one of the most concentrated
they're saying
urban areas in North America.
Yeah. Ford is saying that gridlock costs the economy $11 billion annually.
How long will it take to build a tunnel, though? I mean, I can understand that. I can understand the stop and go and all. Everybody knows that there's undercapacity in and around Toronto. I would rather just start building stuff outside of Toronto and redirect traffic here and there, rather than come all in town. But aside from that, I would say that to build a tunnel, we do need more highway access, unfortunately. But to build a tunnel is dug off his lid. I'm wondering here if he's doing an Idi Amin thing, kind of, like where he just has so unreasonable ideas. Is he going to tell us he wants to be the King of Scotland next?
Okay. So Chris Simone is saying he saw a 5-mile tunnel in Iceland last week. So cool. All right. Karen is saying right now the stats say that there's an accident every 2 minutes somewhere on the 401. How would they handle accidents in a long tunnel? That's a fair and valid question. That is exactly my fear. That's exactly why I was saying that tunnel under Brussels, where it was clicking along at 100 kilometers an hour, I had no issue with it. I would have an issue if we're sat there in a major jam at 0 miles an hour.
Well, they're going to have emergency systems to get in and out of the tunnel like that. But if you have a big, really, I don't know. So they're going to have to be dedicated lanes just for emergency vehicles that can't be used by anyone else, and service side roads and stuff so you can get in and out.
Oh, it's an enormous idea. I think there would have to be separate tunnels to get to certain points in there, so that you could get service vehicle, you could get police cars, ambulances, tow trucks in there to a target point.
Yeah, that's but that is an extraordinary expense. So I imagine dedicated lanes inside the tunnel for emergency and utility vehicles, not to be used by anyone else.
Well, if they're fenced off, fine. Yeah, if they're fenced off, or a separate tunnel, maybe.
Yeah, or I wouldn't be a separate tunnel, because why would you build a separate tunnel unless I don't know. This is an incredibly huge undertaking.
It is.
Ford has these big ideas. I think, I don't know, it's getting to the point where we can't have cars, basically. And actually, that came up in the meeting last night. Certain buildings are being built without any parking spaces in town here because they're to be rented to people who don't have cars. But what happens is people get cars and then they park them illegally in the streets all around.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that's an aside. That was something that came up last night in Laura Coco's meeting, which I forgot about her.
Yeah, there's the same sort of thing. There's one being built currently in St. Catharines, and I was thinking that well, if I was living in there, I'd be buying a monthly parking pass in the garage that I use. I use at work, right? So I'd be buying a monthly car parking pass in that garage in order to get in, in order to get into that building, because that's the only way I could park in the area.
Well, the other thing is, like, he wants to build a tunnel of extraordinary length. I mean, this was compared to the Big Dig in Boston, and the Big Dig had all kinds of problems. I suppose we could learn from what their problems were and how we can do it. But Boston had the Big Dig. What he is proposing here makes the Big Dig the small dig, because it's huge, the length that he is trying to do here. Now, if they have a Big Becky tunneling machine kind of thing and can do this rather quickly, maybe that's what he's thinking about. Get a couple of Big Beckies going in there, and just because then you can chew out a route anywhere you want. You could chew out a route diagonally to the city grid. You could do anything like that. You could bring a lot of cars in and out in more efficient ways.
Yeah. For example, you could take
cost.
Yeah. I was going to say, for example, in theory, you could take one underground from the corner of, let's say, where essentially the Don Valley Parkway starts and the Gardiner ends. You could take one and dig one underneath Scarborough and come out where the 401, where the 401 is, somewhere up to the east of Toronto.
Yeah, well, when they were building the 401, my friends and I took our bikes up on it and rode up and down on our bikes on the 401. I remember going on it, and there was the one section of the road was banked. And I'm thinking, wow, because it was like leaning, like for cars. And I think, wow, I was so thrilled. The cars can go so fast; they can make this bend, But but it relieved the pressures back in the 60s.
Yeah.
But it's too small now. The problem is the city is expanding like crazy. I think really if the planning should be to kind of shut off the development in Metro Toronto right now and force it to satellite areas. What city does that? There's a city that does that where they close down the center of it and then build up satellite areas instead. So you got like, you know, the main city, the mother city, and you know, Offspring City 1, Offspring City 2, Offspring City 3, far enough away to spread out the traffic. Maybe that's in China. I don't know.
I think there's a few in China. There's certainly a few in Europe like that. But again, you know, generally a lot of these cities have other forms of transportation. Europe, you've got a lot of train services.
Right? Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like it was, as I said before, I was just in Portugal. You can get it anywhere in Portugal, even the little remote town that I was in that only had a handful of people. It was out in the middle on the Spanish border, and it was nothing driving into there for miles and miles. But you can get a train, you can get there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
The infrastructure is really good, and that's what I would rather have Doug Ford do is try to. If you wanted to have a big dig like that, put trains in there, put trains and buses in there, you know, to move a lot of people and have them connected to parking lots where people could come somewhere close to the city, park their car, and then get into the public transportation sector.
Okay, Karen says it would be cheaper to buy back the rest of the 407. Ironically,
yeah, she's got a very good point there. But it's a lease that goes along with the 407. So the buyback would be like, okay, you're going to owe us the revenue for the next 100 years. So it might not be that cheaper. But what the NDP has suggested and others just give special rates for trucks to go on the 407. But the problem with the 407, the 407 is there for anybody who wants to use it for a more convenient trip. If you load it up with trucks, what's the point of anyone else taking the 407?
Yeah. And Mike, sorry, not Mike, I mean, Chris Simone says, London trains and buses were incredible. Yeah, they are incredible. But there is still a major congestion problem within London itself, and congestion is getting worse. So congestion there are times where you can take a journey of like a dozen blocks and it takes you an hour plus.
Yeah.
In London.
Yeah.
Well, if you go by car.
I was
go by bus.
3 cities which I thought were spectacular. London and Paris. You can get anywhere, anytime, and the system is so easy to use. Yeah,
in fact, you're better off going by underground or bus.
Yeah, generally. You wouldn't want to bring your car into a town like that.
Yeah.
And the other one is New York City. New York City's got excellent transportation system. It's got it's just fabulous. And so those 3 big cities really know what they're doing. Toronto's not bad, but it's just not enough. The subway system and the streetcar system is pretty good. It's just there's just not enough of it to expand.
Well, one of the big problems. You see, one of the big problems that Toronto has is that downtown in Toronto is at the edge of the city, if you know what I mean. Right? Downtown is right by the lake. So in London, downtown is in the center of a city, and you have the lines spiral out from the center. So it's the same. It's the same in Paris, where you've got there's everything out from the center. And actually Paris is even better than London, because Paris is actually right from the outset was a planned city. So we have Napoleon to thank for Paris being a planned city, and they planned the whole infrastructure as ways around. They actually found loop routes around on the outskirts, and they, in and out is all very well planned, and the road structure is just expanded from the original set way back when. And I don't know. I know nothing about. Don't know enough about New York.
No, well, trust me, New York's a great system.
No, I've
Very
never
great.
been there. So
It's
I
a
don't
good.
know.
It's a good. It's like London. It's like London and Paris, basically. It's
But
very
as I
convenient.
said,
There are routes to just about anywhere you want to
yeah.
go.
But as I said, the one problem you have downtown with Toronto is the downtown is right by the waterfront, and you don't have that circular radiating out from the downtown. You have a different type of effect because of the waterfront.
In any case, Toronto would be better if it was bigger, but that to have this big super dig, I would like to see the feasibility studies on this. Like I said, Ford's kind of sounding a little odd here. You ever see the Woody Allen movie when a guy became the dictator, and one of his first edicts was to have everybody wear clean underwear, and you had to wear them on the outside of your pants so that we could check that they were clean. And that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing I think Ford's going after here. I think, and the Idi Amin thing, any day now, he's going to tell everyone he wants to be the king of Scotland. This seems to be a remarkably out of the way idea. He also has proposed the very high elevated highways that over top of existing highways.
Yeah.
That may be a little bit more practical, but the big time, you know what? I would be glad to eat my hat on this one, because if it's a feasible way, if it's going to be, if it's going to really be a good idea and it's feasible and it's going to bring massive amounts of jobs to the town, I'd be in favor of it. But he has to show me that this is not a thing that taxpayers are going to be stuck with for years and years down the road.
That is the worry, isn't it? That it's going to be the taxpayer that puts the bill.
Yeah, well, I have to give him points for coming up with imaginative solutions.
Yeah. Okay, so Bank of Canada says we need to stick the landing. Inflation is at 2% right now, and we need to kind of make sure our economy is staying together, and we need to keep price growth centered on target. And it's basically he's talking about the need to, get a stronger economy here, right?
What is behind what isn't spoken of here in this article? However, of course, our interest rates are coming down now. The Bank of Canada says, okay, we can bring down the inflation has come to this point, but that's not altogether the complete story. As we've talked about earlier, production levels, Canada's productivity is miserable,
dreadfully low. Yeah,
right. This is partly an attempt to get that back up and going. We probably are not. I think in as far as inflation goes, the Bank of Canada would be happier to hold the interest rates a little higher up until now. But the problem is that our productivity is dropping off, our production is dropping off very rapidly, and we have to try to do something to turn that back around. So we're going to have to offer lower interest rates to stimulate the economy now. Normally, if we had a more healthy economy going into this, he would have been able to hold on a little bit, but he can't. And right now, when he means stick the landing, he says you got to bring the interest rate slow down and really, really have a good close idea, watch what is going on. The the purpose here to bring back down the interest rates was not just so people could have houses, but more so for there to be investment in Canada and help in stimulating the productivity.
Impact. Yeah, that's always the biggest impact. Yes, the pulling down the Bank of Canada interest rate helps the home buyer, helps the mortgage payer. But even more than that, it helps those that were building new industry.
Yeah. Anyway, so they brought it down, but like I said, it's not just because they're bringing it down because they have inflation under control. It's because the opposite is happening. When inflation goes up, then you have uncontrolled spending and prices rise and supply chains are disrupted and all that kind of thing. Now, however, the opposite is happening. And as I said before, there are okay, I'm trying to look for a part in the article, but I can't find it. CIBC is forecasting the central bank will lower its policy to another 2%. The governor also, in his speech, that the Bank of Canada was scaling back its work on central bank digital currency, noting there is no compelling case to move on that right now. But the main thing here, and the takeaway I got from looking at other articles and YouTube videos, basically, is that our production level, that thing that we keep talking about, is the real challenge to the Canadian economy going forward, and a challenge to our growth. Our economy, if left as it is, will continue to decline until the year 2050. We will lose half of our economic wherewithal, or at least the average person will, by 2050, if something hasn't changed. I always hear these forecasts, which are, being not an economist, I don't understand how that all works, of course. But there is a lot of warnings out there that we are an old-fashioned government and government dealing with a new world. So those things, those aspects by which the government interchanges with the economy and industry and all that are rooted back in the 70s. They're out of touch. So they're supplementing industries that don't need it, not supplementing industries that do. They have an archaic look at things, and that can happen. And last night, Lori talked about how archaic the system was in Niagara Falls. They had, when Burgess got in there, they had old Excel spreadsheets and things like that haven't been used for 20 years, but Niagara Falls was still using them. So their systems were old and inefficient. Yeah. So when the CEO came in, things started changing that way. But analogously, that's the same as which I understand is the same as Canada is basically. It's an old-fashioned system that hasn't brought itself up to modern times.
Yeah,
and that's part of the reason why our industries and investment in our industries have fallen off, and our process too. One of our great strengths is our resources, and we have all kinds of resources that can be mined. But as we're reminded by Polyev, it takes 15 years to open a mine, basically. So you want to open a mine, and you have to go through this long, tedious, Byzantine type of process in order to get a mine opened up. Meanwhile,
a lot of
the market's already gone for the nickel or the copper or whatever you're trying to get out of the ground.
But in some respect about that, the reason why you have those additional processes is in part about safety, is in part about ensuring that you're not going to leave behind an ecological disaster.
Right? There are rules already in place for all of that.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what I mean. That's the reason why opening a mine takes time.
15 years?
15 years seems long, but yeah, but I understand, but yeah, we seem
Look,
to,
we're going to have to accelerate that process. If Canada's production is as bad as it is, our manufacturing and all that is not the strongest in the world. What we have to do is what we can provide for the rest of the world, and that is our oil and gas, and our minerals, our copper, our silver, our cobalt, or whatever else we have. And it's really, really hard getting these mines open. It's really hard getting them started, but the world needs what we have. And if we're not going to provide it, somebody else is.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
So there's got to be a way of they keep trying to concentrate on other parts of the economy because they want to diversify away from resources. But right now, resources is one solid thing we have. The rest of it all seems to be very tenuous. Our tech industries, everything, very, very tenuous on slippery ice. Basically, we're not getting, or thin ice. We're not getting there. But what we do have is those resources. We got massive amounts of them, and the world needs them. So I would say to anchor our economy in natural resources, particularly at this time when our economy is declining and our productivity is the lowest in the G20, I would say it's time to get back to basics and try to rebuild the rest of the economy on a foundation of our resources. The diversity has to restart itself based on a base of what we can count on. We can count on selling our resources, so we should exploit them as best we can and use that as a foundation to rebuild a more diversified economy. I used that word Byzantine again. That was the one. That was the word that Chris Simoni wanted to know about. But I know.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, here is relating to Byzantium, now Istanbul, the Byzantine Empire, or the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? Or a system of excessively complicated and typically involved with a great deal of administrative detail. All right.
That last, like, there's two explanations, but the last one he spoke out there is the one that is used when it comes to talk about government or bureaucracy or everything else like that. When it is a Byzantine, it is overly bureaucratized, too many offices, too many hoops to jump through, it's slow and ponderous, and it comes from the it's a word of a description.
It comes from the Byzantine Empire because of how complex that empire was.
Yes, particularly the court, particularly in Constantinople, to get to the emperor, to go through all the different layers of, as you can imagine, layers of people around the emperor to get anything done was a long, protracted, needless sort of system, and so that's where the word comes from. When the Venetians or the Genoans were trying to make deals with Byzantium is about to be reborn.
And Peter Byker,
I think it's already reborn
in think along the lines of the movie Brazil. There you go.
Oh, is that the Monty Python one?
No, it's not Monty Python.
Oh,
I don't think so.
I didn't see the movie Brazil.
No, it's one of these dystopian movies.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I didn't see it because I'm not into dystopian literature.
And Byzantine processes can happen everywhere. If a company gets big, let's say, and you've got all kinds of levels of managers, that's like Byzantine, basically.
Yeah. All right. So next, moving on. Alcohol from Niagara convenience stores. How do the prices compare against LCBO? And that's that. The answer is going to be always more expensive, right?
Yeah, but not altogether. The prices compare favorably. Now, the real trick, though, you might go to a convenience store and think I'm getting it cheaper here than I am at the liquor store, but the liquor store gives you the price with taxes included. The convenience stores are cleverly putting the price of the alcohol without the taxes and then adding it later, like they do with everything else.
Yeah, and the thing is that, but again, that's just about the way that we put prices up in here in Canada. We generally, most stores, when you go in and you buy a pencil for $1, it's going to cost you $1.13 because the tax is added on afterwards.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that doesn't happen in the beer store or the liquor store. They add the complete price.
Yeah.
So that's going to be confusing for people who have been for generations walking into a beer or liquor store and looking at the price and saying, well, that's the whole total price.
Again,
when you go into the convenience stores and look at it there, it's not the total price. But it is in Zehrs, for instance. In Zehrs, it is the total price. So they don't put the price and then add the GST later. They have the complete price. So that's why it's going to be confusing for the consumers until they get used to that.
Yeah. And so what it seems is that on some of these stores they're going to be cheaper, but there's a couple of examples in here. They're talking about like a 12. I had some. Okay. 6-pack cans of Stella Artois. I don't know why anybody would buy that heap of rubbish beer. Sell for $16.99 at 7-Eleven. Circle K sells the same at $17.16. Zehrs $17.12. The beer store is $17.99, but as you said, that's all in. And LCBO that sells at $19.95.
Yeah, so they're going to try to stay competitive. One of the corner stores I went into Monday, they're loading up on alcohol there, and he pretty well told me, look, if you need to have a party or something like that, and you want a party and you want just send in your order to me, what kind of beers you want or not, and wine. I'll put it together, and then you just pick it up. And I am competitive with the beer store, he said.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a pretty good. Like you won't find that offer in the chain convenience stores.
Yeah, that would be definitely a customer service plus. But hey, I've never had that with any convenience store who wanted customer give you customer service like that before. Usually, convenience stores sitting in the corner. Sitting in the corner, arms folded, looking at everything you do under a microscope, as if as if you're going to rob them blind.
Yeah, so that's what else there? Yeah, so that's a service that this particular corner store will do for you. Yeah. It'll put everything together. And let's say you're going to have a party and you want also pop and chips and other snacks to go with it. Let's say you want a couple of bags of potato chips, some potato dip, a case of beer, a couple bottles of wine, that kind of thing. You can phone the guy up and he'll make up that package for you and you can come and get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Also, it goes to 11 o'clock or later. It depends on the convenience store.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay. So, but again, what about like our Sobeys is open 24/7?
That was a little bit different. They don't carry any alcohol in Sobeys or the last time I was there, they did, because they have the liquor store and the beer store right there by them.
Yeah, our Sobeys, they actually run the liquor store, so they run the LCBO. Right, their employees are actually
Now theirs, for instance, which is just down there at Dorchester and Morrison Street, they have it, but you can't. The one time I was in there, you couldn't buy any of that until after 9 o'clock. They went by the same beer store hours. Now I don't know if they've removed that rule now.
I don't
Now
think
that you can buy alcohol in convenience stores, and you can buy it as late as the convenience store is open, then you would think that they would allow the grocery stores then to be able to sell it after 9 o'clock or whatever the beer stores or liquor stores are closed and open.
Yeah.
That's something interesting. If Sobeys is a 24-hour, what is it still? Is it still 24 hours or is it closed at midnight?
Our Sobeys is 24 hours. Yeah, but as I
So
say,
you can imagine you could get beer at any time you wanted in a Sobeys that didn't happen to be beside a beer and liquor store.
Well, exactly. Not all Sobeys are 24/7, and generally speaking, there's only one store in a. Well, yeah, it used to be there was only one store in an area that was 24/7, but actually theirs is 24/7 now, isn't it?
I know. Well, I don't know.
It's pretty late anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's 11 o'clock or something like that. Or
yeah.
So so you can.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're very well serviced by our grocery stores. The problem is the stuff inside it is going up at such a rapid rate. So this whole article is about. It's not exactly a buyer beware article. It's just to try to tell you what's happening and how the rollout is. Now you can imagine going forward that the sort of a convenience store, if it's got a bunch of stuff like Bud Light, like who would ever buy that? But I guess it's popular. I think it tastes sugary, like something for a girl.
So for you, Bud Light, for you, Bud Light is the same as what I would call Stella Artois, a junk drink.
Well, still at least has punching power. It has 5% alcohol.
Stella has nothing positive to be said about it.
It's still popular, and so is Bud Light and all that. Like,
I know.
Budweiser. Why do people drink Budweiser? It tastes sweet. It's like a girl's drink. It's not like real beer. But anyway,
actually, the Budweiser to get is actually the original Czech Budvar.
What?
The original Czech Budvar is actually a much better drink than the Budweiser that is sold in North America.
I imagine it is. I don't know. Everybody wants to get beer as close to pop as possible. Take out part of the alcohol and put more sugar in it. Yeah, and then advertise it with a guy with a motorcycle jacket. But basically, without. Beer is beer, whatever you like, but it is possible then for the corner store, let's say it has a bunch of beer that it can't move, it can sell that for lower prices, a sale price, maybe even just a sale price to bring people into the store. But there's a level of price that they can't go below, as I understand it from this article.
Yeah.
That you can fluctuate your prices, but there's a certain price that you cannot go below. And I suppose that's to stop stop encouraging people to drink, I guess. I don't know. But if a corner store wanted to sell it as cheap as it could, I don't understand why they wouldn't let them. But I guess there's a level where they won't let them sell below.
Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. There's a rabbi in Israel who's calling for the conquering of Lebanon.
Yeah, this is where it gets very complicated over there.
Yeah,
we keep calling Israel a democracy, but a vast part of it is not a democracy. They are religious.
Sorry, I've got to do this one. Peter Biker says torn Ford's underground highway into a giant beer reservoir. Problem solved.
Yeah, you could just pick the big tunnel, fill it up with beer, and everybody can have a tap that goes right down into it and pull off a pint anytime they want.
Thank you, Peter. We needed that one to lift the thing. Okay, back to the rabbi. Sorry.
Yeah, this is what makes everything so complicated in Israel right now. We're called Israel a democracy, but what is happening more and more and more is the religious right is getting more and more power in the parliament. They don't really even believe in the parliament themselves, but they're participating in it. Their religious beliefs tell them that all of the area, the West Bank, Gaza, southern Lebanon, parts of Syria, belong to the Jewish state. So what this rabbi here, Ginsburg, is just, he's very influential, evidently. And what he is saying is just go into southern Lebanon, expel all the people, and start building there. That will be now another part of Israel. The West Bank, get them out of there too. That just push the Palestinians out. The West Bank's ours, and maybe even on the other side of the river is ours. This is what Zionism, an element of Zionism that we never hear from Congress, and we never hear it from our own parliamentarians. We always say that Israel is the only democracy in the area. It is a very limited democracy. It's an ethno-religious state. That means you have to be Jewish, and you have to be Jewish in religion and Jewish in DNA. That means that anyone else is quite excluded. As a matter of fact, Christian tourists go in there now are being spit at and told to go home, kind of thing. So it's becoming a very, very racist, if you like, type of society, and they do not believe. So when you have a government like the Likud party, so politically, secularly, they state in their charter that Israel goes from the Jordan River all the way west and incorporates all of that land area, and that's going to be Israel. That means right in their own charter, they have to get rid of the Palestinians because it's supposed to be a Jewish state. And how can it be a Jewish state when you have Palestinians that are Muslims and Christians? And how do you incorporate them into your state? You don't, because you're an ethno-religious state, which means you're a Jewish state for Jewish people.
And this rabbi is basically saying this is a quote from him. Today, it's clear that that the time has come to conquer Lebanese territory as well. The only in the way that the threat can be removed and true peace can be brought to the entire country. After the conquest and expulsion of hostile population, a Jewish settlement must be established, thus completing the victory. Right?
Yes. Now, counter that with some other rabbis. We talked about it the other day, where a religious offshoot of Judaism demanded that Zionism was not the same as Judaism, and they denounced Zionism. How do you then, in the West Bank, they have the settler movement that says God gave us this land, and they go into the olive groves and they yank out the olive trees that have been there for hundreds of years, and families have been farming them. And they say, well, you got to go because God gave us this land, and they rip out the olive trees. They go and set fire to Palestinians' cars. They block off the roads. They do damage like crazy, and they do this with impunity. When the police go over and talk to them, they said, no, you shouldn't do that, and then go away. Here's a gun and some more bullets, kind of thing. It is not a fair state. It is an apartheid state. It is a racist state. Palestinians don't actually say that, but they do say that we are the children of the lesser God in Israeli society. They have all the advantages. They're the ethno-religious group that runs the thing, and they don't want us around. And of course, you're going to get friction between the two. And how do you then argue with somebody says that God gave me this land? Now, this guy, Ginsburg, he's religious, and he says, okay, walk in. Go ahead, walk in. And here's Peter Biker said, Lebanon was 58% Christian in 1932. By 2020, the numbers had dwindled to 32%. Make of that what you will. Yeah, because all the Christians are running away, getting out of there. Yeah. If they can. And don't make any mistake, as many Muslims that took off as well. The educate, I met them when I was in Libya. So it wasn't just Christian Lebanese that were taking off. It was Muslim Lebanese were taking off. The more educated ones, the more urban ones, the more cosmopolitan ones. If they could get out, they would.
Yeah.
And you're sitting with a cosmopolitan Arab from Lebanon when they're drinking a beer and playing poker. Two things their religion doesn't tell them to say they can't do.
All right. Okay, so I think we can call it quits at that point, because it's been an exciting week in terms of news and what we've been reporting upon. We didn't get it through our block of stuff as always. And Peter Biker says, Salam alaikum, my brother. Yes, salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, yes. There we go. All right.
Kula quiz, inshallah.
Yeah, and yeah, so that kind of week. So final thoughts, Dave.
Kula Mashnoon. That means everybody's crazy. When I look at the world news, I say to myself, Kula Mashnoon. Everyone's crazy.
Yeah.
And anyway, everyone, peace, peace, peace. Though Canada's being drawn into a war. One of the articles we didn't get at was NATO is insisting that Canada start getting itself on a war footing just in case it has to. And
we'll bring that up next week.
Yeah, we'll bring that up next week. This whole thing, Israel's dragging us, going to drag the rest of us into a war, and it's refusing the peace deals that are on the table. Every time they come up with a peace deal, the Hamas accepted it back in July, and Israel was then the one that started putting the monkey wrench to it. And they have already refused the deal that France and Britain came up with. They just denounced it right off the bat before even reading it.
Yeah.
So if this keeps going, we're going to get dragged into the war. Also, Ukraine, I can't see that continuing on before the rest of us get dragged into it. They may not have Canadian or American soldiers there, but what they will do is have mercenaries and private companies supplied by the U.S. and Canada and NATO to do their fighting. It's a terrible thing. Stop all fighting.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say. Pray for peace.